And let me know if you can't hear me, and pardon me for fumbling as I try to do. I've been too lazy to try to grow a third arm, but try to juggle things here as I go through. I'm going to talk about why I wrote the book, share some statistics about Vietnam, but mainly tell you about my experience by sharing excerpts from my book.
Connor, do you want me to flip your slides for you so you can just, that way you don't have to worry about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
Just
give
tell
you a
me when
nod. Okay. So my experience, I was told in advanced individual training in the Army, that comes after basic, that there were 22 support personnel for every infantryman in the field. So there was a lot of non-combat soldiers in Vietnam. So my experience, I think, is more common than your ones that you might have seen in, say, Apocalypse Now. Okay, give you an overview. Why did I write the book? It was another step for me in dealing with my trauma. It helps crystallize your ideas and your memories if you write things, and I encourage people, whether you consider you have trauma or not, to journal and write. I wanted to help other people to deal with their issues about it. Anyone, for that matter, not just servicemen. Provide an account and give people a better understanding of what happened in the war, or at least broaden that understanding and offer hope for others. Okay. Oddly enough, over there they call it the American War. Go figure. We first were there when the Marines landed ashore near Da Nang in July of 1965. Our troop strength peaked in April of '69 at just over 540,000 men. We completed our withdrawal on March the 29th, 1973. So that was quite a span of years there. We abandoned our embassy there in April 30th of 1975. If you recall, if you were alive then, seeing the news, people were scrambling to get on the helicopters on the roof of the embassy. Okay. I dropped out of engineering school early 1968. The grades weren't that good. My eyes went bad. I'll say more about that later. I was drafted. I received my notice in late '68 and was inducted January 29th, '69. So I'll start with an excerpt here. January 29, 1969, the day I dreaded since dropping out of engineering school. On that cold, overcast morning, Dad parked our Chevy station wagon at the curb in front of the local draft board building in Louisville. Mom, Dad, and I waited in silence for my scheduled rendezvous with transportation, or whatever would follow. We'd avoided mention of Vietnam to that point, or at least I did, as if some veil had descended. But I couldn't escape its constant reminders. Berlin, my younger brother by 4.5 years, and had stayed home to ready himself for school, and we'd exchanged our goodbyes there. Worry wart Mom crushed the wadded tissue. She used to wipe away her stream of tears. Dad remained still, facing straight ahead, reminded of his Navy experiences in World War II, I guessed. Mom had told me he'd suffered nightmares after that war. I unfolded and reread my draft board papers for the umpteenth time. No mistake. Report for induction into the U.S. Army. The slow asphalt roller of the draft process had caught up to me and made it clear that Uncle Sam wanted me. Reluctant to serve, I fantasized I'd be overlooked at the draft office, hoping some unseen power would wag a finger and push my records off the desk into a trash can. Or a derelict alcoholic would drop a lit match and burn down the draft board building. I wanted to avoid a mom meltdown, wanted to stay strong and say to her, I'll be okay. Wanted to tell her not to worry, but I couldn't. Doubt swirled about the decisions that had led me to my current circumstances. And dread mixed with sadness over departing from the two people always nearby. I was about to go into the future where new possibilities would lead me into manhood or a body bag. Soon after being drafted, I enlisted to become an intelligence analyst because I didn't want to go to nominee infantry. I completed AIT late, Advanced Individual Training, late April of '69, and I was deployed to Vietnam, South Vietnam, Republic of, as we'd say in the Army, in June of '69. We're beginning our descent into Tan Son Nhut, the pilot announced. Whoosh. A rush of warm, humid air circulated through the cabin, carrying the smell of corrupted vegetation, a jungle of living and dying, thick, heavy, and hidden in darkness. I felt a sense of suffocation. Constrained by my circumstances and forced to remain buckled to my seat while being propelled into my unknown future, my lungs threatened to seize. My throat threatened to slam shut. Every cell of my body wanted to deny reality. Before the plane rolled to a stop, a sergeant stated, "If we encounter incoming rounds, keep moving until you're off the plane and get to a bunker or hit the deck." His instructions, straightforward, amounted to no bones about it, slap in the face. As if those words weren't enough, he delivered another swift kick in the ass. The plane's engines will continue running. Once we're off and an outgoing group boards, this plane will leave. That comment extinguished the last possibility of my escaping Nam. Reality had come home to roost. You ain't in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. However unrealistic my hopes had been, there was no way around the fact that I'd arrived in Nam and wasn't leaving anytime soon. And it wasn't like I thought I'd hide in the plane's lavatory or cargo hold. Pronto, I was off the plane, onto a bus, gone from the airfield and delivered to Long Bin in Processing Center. The bus driver brought us to a stop. "Grab your duffels and dismount. Enjoy your stay." No time for jokes. I could be dead in a minute. A wet dog smell, along with the cloud of dust carried by a gust of wind, greeted me when I stepped off the bus. Will I melt into the heat and humidity? The sergeant standing nearby pointed an index finger toward a building. "You're assigned to that bunk. Go in and plant your ass on an empty bunk." Yeah. Another no-frills Army accommodation greeted me. The same forest green linoleum flooring, wood beam support columns, bunk beds in rows, spaced 6 feet apart, the same as in basic and advanced individual training. What was new was the odor of Nam rot. And where am I and how did I get here? Questions that clogged my head. When would a half-crazed sergeant burst in, screaming orders and berating me? That's a picture of my early time in Vietnam. Okay. As an intelligence analyst, I was assigned to 55th Military Intelligence Detachment, which was at 2 Corps headquarters in the train. Steve rushed into the office, back from mail run. "Hey guys, we got a newbie and I heard we're on the moon." Our vocal office celebration spread with contagion. I pumped a closed fist. "Yeah, our office newbie can wait a few minutes. We beat the commie bastards." A mix of images of our race into space over the past decade came to mind, reminding me I no longer followed my space dream, but instead occupied a table in puke green fatigues on a much different path. I dreamed of going into space 2.5 years earlier and thought I knew how to get there. I'd do undergraduate engineering school in Campus Air Force ROTC at U of L. Then I'd get a master's in aeronautical engineering as an Air Force pilot and work my way into our astronaut corps. But my dream collapsed when I developed myopia, which required eyeglasses. I knew the Air Force had a strict rule requiring pilots and astronauts to have perfect vision, so I'd given up that dream and soured on the military. It had never occurred to me that my space dream had required I'd be a lifer in the Air Force. I was billeted in the compound next to the headquarters for 6 months, and then later we moved to a place called the Pie Slice. That's a photo of me much later on next to the barracks, the Pie Slice. Now that was near the perimeter. The headquarters were pretty safe away from the perimeter. Thump. Roused from sleep, I thought, what was that? Thump. A collective GI consciousness dared to attention. Another moment paused before urgent cries of incoming echoed from scattered locations by guys yanked from dreamlands of heated fornications with eager young females, or the bliss of nothingness. Thump. Mortars, Ray yelled from the adjacent barrack. Should I move? Thump. Are they a safe distance away? Shall I stay on my bunk? Thump. Greetings from Charlie, Kevin yelled from across our barrack. We never dealt with mortar rounds at the hotel, I said. Thump. No, the compound is 5-star, Kevin replied. Move. No creaking bunk frames. No footsteps across the concrete floor. With a yin-yang of indecision, I held my breath. My heart pounded. Head for the bunker, I called out. Thump. You might not get there, Paul replied. Roll out and crawl under your bunk if they get close. Thump. Another round had crashed into something solid. Still a safe distance away. A shift in the mortar's aim could put one anywhere, even right on top of me. Thump. Time to move. Which way are they going? I called out. Thump. They're not walking this way, Ray yelled back. Stay. Thump. Let's keep it that way, I yelled, and appreciate Ray's ability to determine directions the rounds walked. I couldn't distinguish the line, but knew Charlie lobbed his shells trying to hit a valuable target. Random for Charlie, personal for me. Usual tour was 1 year. We call it 365. Minus the drop. Some got 6 days, some got maybe 8. I got 3, turned out to be more like 1. Okay. I returned stateside in July of 1970. Relieved to be away from Nam, my brain told me I didn't have to expect a rocket or mortar attack. Didn't have to expect to hear someone scream the words, incoming. I saw clues all around me, from the clothes people wore to the absence of trash littering the floor. Everything appeared newer and brighter in color. I detected no heavy smells of mold or rot filling warm, humid air. Everyone spoke words I understood. My bones told me otherwise, however. Nothing quite right. Everything felt familiar, though different. Rather, everything reminded me of Vietnam, a queer reversal of the previous 12 months, where I hadn't been able to avoid thoughts of home everywhere I looked. Not from the presence of familiar things, but their absence. I was assigned to Fort Bragg in North Carolina for the remainder of my time. I was discharged October 71. Ask any serviceman, they'll tell you how many days, months, and years they served. Mine was 288. I didn't know until the day I was discharged that I was subject to reactivation according to President's call for 7 years after that, and I had nightmares about it for 7 years. Okay. Here's some statistics, grim though they are, and it depends on how you slice them. We lost about 41,000 in the field. They died right there. Just over 1,000 were missing in action. I don't know how many declared dead, but I don't know how many missing that we've ever gotten returned. 575 were killed, and there wasn't enough to send back home. 47,000 plus total hostile deaths, and we had a few that were non-hostile. 382 were self-inflicted. That was suicide. Hey, Connard, remember me, Alex from AIT? Of course. I hadn't bothered to keep track of anyone from basic or AIT. Hadn't bothered to keep track of high school or college mates either. Dad had moved us around enough times as I grew up that I learned to float along on the current of life's river and considered most relationships scenery along the bank. I decided to look you up, so I ran down your assignment records. Maybe my records at Military Assistance Command Vietnam in Saigon. I'll get to the point. I thought you'd want to hear about Jelly Bean. You remember Jelly Bean? Soft-spoken, red hair, light complexion Jelly Bean. How could I forget? He died last week from a gunshot wound to the head. Wait, what? I reread that sentence. He died, gunshot wound to the head. No. Mild meat Jelly Bean? Dead. Dead at Jelly Bean at Halliburton AIT. Shit silly after a few slugs of slow gin. Another casualty of Nam. Returned to the States in a body bag. Part of an anonymous newscast statistic. Not anonymous to me. Shot. Who shot him? I continued reading. Shot himself while cleaning his weapon. They reported it as an accident from a gunshot wound sustained while cleaning his weapon. We had over 10,000 servicemen who were women served there, mostly nurses, and 8 of those died. So it wasn't just all men. Okay. Various studies compiled here that from 79 to 2019, just over 22,000 suicides were among veterans who had been deployed. But those rates weren't any more or less than the general population. So I don't know what that says about Vietnam vets committing suicide or the general population committing suicide. So Vietnam era vets, whether they were in Vietnam or not, there were over 94,000 who committed suicide. That was several years ago that statistic was kept. Okay, looking for my number here. I don't see it. Here. Oh, I see it. It's hiding. Okay. I'd worked hard to keep everything together since day one in the Army, to appear adequate, to avoid loss of control, and not get busted for fighting, although I'd come close more times than I cared to remember. Now, however, no longer wearing dog tags and puke green fatigues, I resembled my crumpled heap of Roadrunner scrap metal, both inside and out. I totaled the car. And I never admitted to anyone, not a single soul, that my shit wasn't together until there at the med center. The doc's voice remained steady and confident. I know a good counselor, and I think she can help you. He picked up the phone receiver nearby and dialed the University Counseling Center. I want to schedule an appointment, he told somebody on the other end of the line. He looked at me. Next Tuesday, okay? A long way off. I hoped I could make it. I nodded and accepted that appointment card the way a drowning man grabs a lifeline. Thank you. Tears wet my face. I wanted to hide from the horrified look on the young female receptionist's face, whom I saw out of the corner of my eye as I hurried to the exit of Med Center. I figured the doc had spilled the beans and she could read my darkest secrets. I have a suicide line hotline number there, 988. I'm not sure just how well that's manned nowadays, unfortunately. But there are suicide services out there for people. And I encourage all veterans, or anyone with trauma for that matter, to not try to deal with it alone. Okay? Thought I had one more here, but I guess, let's see. I guess that's it. I have a few books here. I do a newsletter to inform people of my writing. I do a lot of posts on my website about my world travel, my hiking Pacific Crest Trail, and my developments writing my third book, and some about my marketing in these first 2 books. So with that, questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question.
Ms. David,
First of all, I want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Acknowledge the sacrifice that you made, not just by going, but in your return. I'd like you to talk about more than your years in country, your return to the world. I personally think that it is shameful, regardless of how one felt about the Vietnam War, our involvement in it, whether it was good, bad, right, wrong, whatever. I think it's shameful the way our veterans who served in the war were treated upon their return to country, to the world. And with the exception of those who returned after being prisoners of war, who were given parades and accolades, the rest of you all, 99% of you all who came back, alive or dead, received, in my opinion, nothing in recognition for your service outside of basically a unspoken word to stay quiet about Vietnam, not talk about it. Mm-hmm. So if you would address that and your feelings about it. I just, not too long ago, finished reading Kirsten Hannah's book, The Women. If many of you know, Kirsten Hannah is what a fabulous writer she is, but that is an unbelievably strong story of the return. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to talk about your feelings in that.
Okay. By the time I went in 1969, there had already been years of news reports. Walter Cronkite and others talking about how many had died this past week and all that. So I had already been prepared as I went to really wonder if I was going to get shot at any minute. At that point, too, there had been a lot of protests going on. The protests had ramped up and they were kind of at their maximum, I guess. And we would hear news stories about the veterans being spat upon, called baby killers. That was after My Lai, I think it was. And so when I came home, I wanted to keep a low profile. Although I had short hair, I had to maintain short hair because I was still in the military for another year, a few months after my return stateside. I was, young and my hormones were raging, and I wanted to find a woman to be a companion, so I would do that, but I didn't go out in any kind of military uniform. I tried to avoid any. I was lucky enough, I guess, Louisville, we didn't have protests, or at least they weren't big, or they weren't cast in the news, so I never knew of that, but I didn't want to go around and protest at all. And I didn't want to make any announcement to anybody that I was still in the military or had been in Vietnam. I wouldn't say I was ashamed of it, but I just wanted to be quiet because I didn't want to have to confront that kind of reaction from some people. The problem with not getting welcomed home was, except for a few units, we weren't deployed to Vietnam as a unit. So we were rotating in and out as individuals. And even when I reported for my duty in the office of maybe 8 others, we would be leaving maybe every month, every other month. So we didn't come as a group, we didn't go as a group. So we didn't really have that feeling when we went or when we came back of being as a team or having that kind of camaraderie, although we developed it while we were there, and some, I'm sure, kept their relationships. I didn't. It just wasn't in my bloodstream at the time to try to remember those experiences. I tried to avoid them, and that didn't work too well for me. I ended up suicidal, and as I mentioned earlier, I totaled a car. So it wasn't a pretty picture. But basically, I'd say the short of all that is I just try to maintain a low profile. I just didn't want to do it. Other than my family being at the gate when I returned home in Louisville at the airport, that was the only welcome I got. Yeah.
If you don't mind, can you share about what your next book is going to be about?
Sure. I don't mind. Well, it's a collection of some of my climbing experiences, not so much the hiking. I've done more hiking lately, but climbing some mountains around. I've gone to every high point in the U.S., climbed Denali in Alaska, Aconcagua in Argentina, Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, some of the minor things, Mount Fuji in Japan. I hiked out the Kosciuszko in Australia. It's a hike, it's not a climb. So I put together experiences of that, but I've also intertwined things that make it more of a memoir, because I have I wouldn't call it a fictional character, but primate as more of my id, representing my fear of heights, is woven into the book. So it's climbing adventure, kind of slash memoir in that sense.
It's like a form of therapy for you, in effect?
The climbing?
Yeah.
Probably, I think just being out in nature. One is not only just conditioning of the body, but being in nature and appreciating my connection to nature and the universe in general, but also camaraderie with others, and feeling special. Not that many people do those kinds of things. And so I feel like every time I went to a summit at a peak, I was like, this is an experience that most people will never have. Some, yes, but most, never. Yes, ma'am.
Was your counseling experience based on veterans, based on working with vets?
No, it was just in general. Yeah. As I said, I didn't go out of my way to try to work with veterans, but it turned out that my first full-time job was just general population addicts. Most of those had been in jail. I don't know if that many had been in the military, maybe a few. But I can't say that I've worked that closely with veterans. Anyone else? How are we doing on time?
Perfect.
Jim? Great, okay. I have some books here. Also have a newsletter I put out every quarter, inform people what I'm doing with my writing. Sign up for that. I do have some business cards. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Connard.